and trust that you have had a rich week of study in our final week of Know, pressing in to know the Lord better according to who he has revealed himself to be in the pages of his word. Throughout our fourth week of study, we explored a few of the areas of our lives that are impacted as we know the Lord better. We considered that the more we know him, the more we worship him. That the more we know him, the more we love him. That the more we know him, the more we trust him. That the more we know him, the more peace we have in our day-to-day lives. And that the more we know him, the more we want to know him. In our time together last week, we discussed how pivotal knowing him more is to every facet of our lives. Because when he is in his rightful position, and I more rightly and more accurately view him as he truly is, there is a radical change that happens in my perspective towards everything else in my life. Another impact that we're going to explore is the impact that knowing the Lord more has on guarding our hearts against idolatry. The more fully we know the real thing, the one our hearts were designed to yearn for and be oriented towards, then the less likely our hearts are to be lured away to cheap substitutes, many of which are not necessarily physical and tangible substitutes or idols, but are idols of the heart and the mind. In Exodus 20, the first two commandments deal with idolatry, that you should have no other gods before me, and that you should not make a carved image, not bow down to it or serve it. And we explored in our study this week out of Matthew 22, which repeats a passage in Deuteronomy 6, that Jesus referred to the first and the greatest commandment as loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. The command to love God with all that we have, and that guards us against idolatry. Knowing him more, understanding and rooting ourselves in the real thing guards our hearts against cheap substitutes. I want to read a few passages to you out of A.W. Tozer's book, Knowledge of the Holy. He says this about idolatry. He says, among the sins to which the human heart is prone, hardly any other is more hateful to God than idolatry. The essence of idolatry is the entertainment of thoughts about God that are unworthy of him. When we try to imagine what God is like, we must of necessity use that which is not God as the raw material for our minds to work on, because we're not capable of anything outside of that. He goes on to say, hence, whatever we visualize God to be, he is not. For we have constructed our image out of that which he has made. And what he has made is not God. If we insist upon trying to imagine him, we end with an idol, made not with hands, but with thoughts. And an idol of the mind is as offensive to God as an idol of the hand. That dependence that we have on him to continually renew our hearts and our minds and expose to us anything that we believe about him that is less than true, anything that is unworthy of him and that is not accurate according to his word. In 1 Kings chapter 15, two different kings are discussed. And the first, it said of him, of King Abijam, it says, he walked in all the sins that his father did, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God. The NIV words this as he was not fully devoted. See, when idolatry sneaks in to our hearts, and it usually is sneaky, it's usually not overt like a carved image up on our mantle. The enemy is sneaky and conniving. And so idolatry starts as not a big deal, but it's contrary to the place and the rightful place that only God should have in our hearts. And when that begins to happen, we're not wholeheartedly devoted to him. We're not fully committed. And that was the case with this king. But 1 Kings 15 goes on and discusses another king. And it says of him that he, King Asa, was wholly true to the Lord all of his days. He didn't have a perfect track record. It records that in 1 Kings 15. But it says, nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly true to the Lord. The NIV says he was fully committed to the Lord. The church of Ephesus in Revelation chapter 2, verse 4 is said to have forsaken their first love. That's what idolatry does to us. But when we rightly know who God is, increasingly more, right? We talked last week about how we'll never fully arrive. We'll never fully grasp all there is to know about the Lord because he's not like us and our brains are finite and he is infinite. But the more, the increasingly growing knowledge and understanding that we have of who God is according to the pages of his word, that guards us against idolatry because we better know the one who is on the throne and the only one who deserves to be there on the throne of our hearts. When I am divided in my devotion to the Lord, it is often because I do not have an accurate view of who he is. And when I don't have an accurate picture of who God is, and when I'm not fully and wholeheartedly devoted to him, I'll never be able to live the way that he's called me to live. I'll never fully obey him and press on in obedience to him, even when I don't perceive that things are going well. How often do we step forward trembling in obedience to something God has called us to, but it just doesn't go the way that we thought it was going to go? But the Lord is still at work, and he'll still use those steps of obedience. Again, we talked about this out of Isaiah last week. His ways, they're not our ways, not in a mysterious way necessarily, but he is ready to pardon. He's spring-loaded with compassion, and he is who he says in his word. There's a passage in 2 Peter, it's chapter 1, verses 3 through 8, and it uses the phrase being unfruitful in the knowledge of God. And that really struck me because it's a little scary to think that that's possible. It is possible to be unfruitful in the knowledge of God. But we've pressed in for 4 weeks to know him more and more, and we don't want to be unfruitful in our knowledge, in our growing knowledge of who he is. So how do we guard against that? How do we guard against being unfruitful in our knowledge of the Lord? And how do we keep knowing him more and more? How do we grow more in that knowledge? Well, first of all, we stay humble and we stay hungry before him. Psalm 27:8 says, "You have said, seek my face. And my heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek." May we be women who just seek his face, humbly and with great hunger, that we seek his face more than we seek answers to our questions, more than we seek provision, more than we seek anything he could give us. May we just seek his face. Another way that we can keep growing in knowing the Lord more and guard against being unfruitful in that knowledge is in Psalm 46:10. And we've talked about this before, but the invitation from the Lord is be still and know that I am God. Do we have a regular rhythm with the Lord to just be still with him in his presence and in his word, and to invite him to show us more of who he is, but also to show us what is in our heart and mind that's not accurate according to his word, according to who he reveals himself to be. The enemy loves to deceive us. So even after these 4 weeks of pressing in to know him more and spending regular time to be still with him and in his word, for all of our days, we must continually be on guard against lies from the enemy. That was the enemy's game plan back in the garden in Genesis. And that is still his game plan today, is to little by little just deceive us about who we know God to be. So we must continually ask the Lord to expose the lies of the enemy and to renew our hearts and mind in the capital T truth of who he says he is in his word. And we do that by being still with him. He doesn't say be in motion and know I am God. He says be still and know that I am God. A third way that we can keep growing in who we know God to be and guard against being unfruitful in our knowledge of him is to regularly ask the Lord, show me more. Show me more. Teach me more about who you are. Teach me a greater depth of your steadfast love, of your mercy, of your grace, of the way that you're slow to anger. Moses asked twice of God. Exodus 33, verse 13, he says, show me now your ways that I might know you. And in verse 18 of Exodus 33, Moses says, please show me your glory. That we would have a regular habit of asking the Lord to teach us more, to keep our hearts humble, hungry, and teachable, that through the power of his Holy Spirit living in us, we would know him more and more for the rest of our lives. These 4 weeks together are not a box to check, but my hope and my prayer is that for each of us, this has been a catalyst that will make a daily impact for the rest of our lives in pursuing to know the Lord more. That it will be like a jump on a trampoline that springs us forward into regular, intentional pursuit to know him a little bit better tomorrow, and then a little bit better the next day, and a little bit better by October 1st, and a little bit better come the first day of 2026, and so on, for the rest of our time here on planet Earth. I pray that this has been a taste of his goodness and a taste that makes us want more, that we would become even more thirsty for him at the end of this study than we were when we started. Like Psalm 42 verse 1 says, that we would pant for him all the more now, even more so than we did 4 weeks ago, that we would pant for him like a deer pants for water. What a joy our time together has been these 4 weeks. I'm so grateful that you've been a part of it, and it's just been so fun to see and to hear just a little of what the Lord is doing. Sometimes I think there's no way my spirit could handle knowing all that he's doing. But it's been so encouraging. I know him better. I hope you do too. And may we all continue to press in to Him regularly, to be still with Him, to remain humble, to remain hungry, and to be women who put regular, humble, but also fierce intention into knowing the Lord better according to who He has revealed Himself to be in His Word. I hope you have a blessed week.